Welcome back, everybody, with Chess with me, myself, and I, Johannes van Rensburg. Today we're covering Johannes Zukertort, and he is, in one sentence, just the chess giant, the forgotten chess giant from the 19th century. He was born in Lublin, Congress, Poland, and he lived a life as dramatic and complex as his chess. His father, a Christian missionary of Jewish origin, was forced to flee Russian-occupied Poland for Prussia due to religious persecution. He would go on to study medicine in Breslau, but it was there he discovered his true calling, chess. Under the guidance of Adolf Anderssen, nonetheless, Adolf Anderssen, the chess legend. Though he lost his early match against Anderssen in 1868, Zukertort improved rapidly, avenging the losses 3 years later. His move to London in 1872 set the stage for a glittering competitive career. He became a naturalized British citizen in 1878, and that same year he tied for first at the prestigious Paris International Chess Congress. Zukertort's crowning achievement came in 1883 at the London tournament, where he scored a stunning 22 out of 26 points, 3 points ahead of Steinitz. His brilliance led to the first official World Chess Championship match in 1886, where he started strong, but faded as Steinitz claimed the title. Zukertort was plagued by declining health, suffering from rheumatism, heart disease, kidney problems, and osteosclerosis. Zukertort's final years were marked by physical struggle and a waning chess performance. He collapsed during a game in 1888 and died shortly thereafter of cerebral hemorrhage. A top-ranked player of his time according to chess metrics, Zukertort was a paradox, an aggressive tactician who favored the positional flexibility of one knight f3 and one c4. The Colley-Zukertort system and Zukertort's opening still bear his name till this day. Beyond the board, he co-edited the Chess Monthly and amazed crowds with his blindfold simults, winning out 11 of 16 games in one exhibition. Buried in Brompton Cemetery, Zukertort's grave was neglected for decades until a 2012 campaign led by Grandmaster Stuart Conquest and funded by the Polish government restored it. A fitting tribute to a forgotten giant of a game. So the first game is known as the Viennese Waltz. Zukertort was 35 years of age when he played this game. Unfortunately, his opponent is not named. With the white pieces is Johannes Zukertort and his opponent aptly titled No Name or NN. So the first move is e4, e5, and knight c3. This is the starting position of what is known as the Vienna game. With knight c3, white keeps the intentions flexible, waiting to see how black responds. Black can either play knight f6, entering what is nowadays called the Falkbeer variation, and sometimes referred to as the Berlin defense, or knight c6, a more classical development that has occasionally been called a Max Lang defense. Black opts for the Falkbeer variation, which is by far the most played move in this position. White has several main options. One is g3, known as the Mies variation, aiming for a solid fianchetto setup. Another is bishop to c4, the Stanley variation, going for quick piece development and central pressure. There's also knight f3, which transposes into the three knights game, a more classical developmental approach. Finally, there is f4, the aggressive Vienna Gambit, which is the move white chooses here. The Vienna Gambit is a close relative to the King's Gambit, often seen as a more solid and flexible alternative. Both openings aim to strike at Black's central e5 pawn and undermine their grip on the center. A key distinction, however, is that in the Vienna Gambit, Black's queen can't get easily access to the h4 to e1 diagonal due to the presence of the knight on f6. So, d6 is played. I just want to first briefly mention why taking the gambit is everything but a good move. And that is, after e5, the knight on f6 has no good squares to go to, as all of them are covered. And the only move that the knight can play is, in fact, back to g8. You could ask, perhaps, why can't queen e7 be played? But that leads to queen e2, still forcing the retreat of the knight. And the more often played move in this position is actually d5. It is the modern main line of the Vienna Gambit. And the idea behind it is quite simply to meet the flank attack with a central counter-strike, an important principle in chess strategy. However, d6 acquired to response it supports the e5 pawn, but it comes at the cost of locking in the dark squared bishop. It's a solid move. Knight f3 is then played, knight c6 and bishop c4. Zukertort could have played bishop b5, forcing a concession from Black. The reason I say concession is if you don't do one of these, you simply lose the pawn on e5. White goes a pawn up. An example would be if bishop e7 is played, you can play f takes e5, d takes e5, and knight takes on e5, being up a pawn, as this knight is pinned to the king. So Black has options. You've got, for example, bishop d7, breaking the pin, but the bishop gets developed to a passive square. Alternatively, there is e takes on f4, which allows Black to take white to take the full center with d4. Last but not least is the option of playing knight f to d7. And this also breaks the pin, but it's at the cost of undeveloping a piece, losing valuable time in the process. So bishop c4 is still okay. Bishop b5 is just slightly better. Bishop g4 passes. This is a slight inaccuracy because the better move here would have been f takes e5, followed by d takes e5. Now, if the knight were to take here, is knight takes e5, bishop drops back, and c5, just trying to stop any d4 pawn push. And secondly, if a pawn takes and bishop e5 is played, bishop c5 comes in, stopping white from castling kingside. Bishop takes on c6, b takes c6. And what we have here is a damaged pawn structure, and like I said, the computer evaluates it as slightly better for white, but not that big a deal. I actually think castles is perfectly fine in this position. It follows the principles. But bishop e7 misses the idea of playing e takes on f4 in this position, which is actually okay for black. In fact, it's preferable because after, for example, the move d4 being played, black can play g5, stopping any easy development for the dark square bishop for white, and giving black easy development with bishop g7, can choose to castle kingside or queenside, and also take space on the kingside, possibly leading to a dangerous kingside attack. But bishop e7 is played. It is not the best move. Better would have been queen to e7, preparing to castle queenside and leaving some flexibility for black, as well as knight d4, centralizing a knight and piling on more pressure on the knight on f3. But I digress. d3 is played, and knight h5 is in fact really not a good move. It aims to capture the pawn on f4 and keep it, which is an understandable idea, but it comes at the cost of taking a nicely placed knight that's having an influence on the center and misplacing it to the edge of the board, where it is horribly misplaced. Also, the move exposes the king to the following tactical shot. Bishop takes on f7 check. After the king takes, we have knight c5 check, and we pick up the knight. Sorry, the bishop on g4. If the king just moves, we still pick up the knight, and after the bishop takes, we play knight takes e5, and again we get rid of the pin. So it's a tactical blunder, and I would say a positional mistake. But white instead opts to play f takes on e5 also. Just to be clear, e takes on f4 is the move preferred by the engine, after which bishop takes f4 and knight d4 again increases pressure. The king moves out of any possible checks, and the game continues from this position. But I also believe castles in this position would have been a-okay for black. Knight h5 is just not the correct plan. White opts to play f takes e5 here, not going for the tactical shot, but I believe it is out of choice. The best move for black in this very position is in fact the counterintuitive castles and not taking back. As taking back still allows this tactical shot to happen. And this move we will cover last. So after castles, we are just clean a pawn up as white, but black has some counterplay with the pin, and the knight unfortunately is still badly misplaced. So it is not the best move f takes e5, but it is because white deliberately chose to play this move, setting a deeper trap. And knight takes e5. Go and calculate this position and try and find the winning continuation in this game. We're talking about calculating at least 8 moves, so bear that in mind. But knight e5 is a game-losing blunder. It's a textbook example of one player calculating deeper and more accurately than the other. The following lines illustrate how devastating white's tactical resources are. So let's get to why I say this is an example of one player calculating better than the other. Black thinks that by taking on e5 he keeps the material count equal, while also stopping any bishop takes on f7 check tactical ideas, because the knight covers f7, and also the knight and bishop reinforces the 10, putting more pressure on the knight. Except Zukertort saw this, saw a wonderful sequence after this, with knight takes e5, sacrificing the queen. So, after bishop takes d1, and just to be clear, if d takes on f, d1 was played, you'd have bishop takes f4, king f8, and bishop takes on h5 check. And white is just simply winning. So bishop takes d1, bishop takes on f7 check, king f8, and bishop takes on h5 check yet again. There is a variety of these two moves that black could play here. King g8 is one, but that leads to bishop f7 check once more, followed by knight d7 check, which would be checkmate except the queen can capture, which allows bishop e6 discover check, king e8, and the bishop takes the queen with check, king takes, and we have an extra piece and pawn, absolutely winning for white. The other idea is to play bishop f6. This could be a place where you don't find the best move, but the best move is the rook takes on f6, sacrificing the rook as well. There is a variety of ideas here from king g8, which the move order is bishop f7 check yet again, king f8, rook f5, and the position is also busted for black. After d takes e5, we've got bishop f3, forcing the king to go to the e file. If the king goes to d file, if the king goes to d7, bishop g5 skewers the king to the queen, and we are yet again a piece up. If the king goes to e8, we've got rook takes on e5 check. King can go back to f8, and now we are setting up some devastating attacking ideas. The bishop can't drop back, because once the bishop drops back, we have rook f1 check, leading to checkmate in 3. And last but not least, if king d7, we simply have rook d5 check, skewing the king to the queen, and we have 2 pieces for rook, which is generally a better position. Because if this, we have rook takes, let's say rook takes, knight takes, and we have again an extra piece as well in that calculation, so 3 pieces for rook actually. So after rook f5, the king can also go to e7, but that's just leading to knight d5 check, which is also absolutely winning after the following sequence of moves, which leads to an absolutely winning position. And we are simply swarming the white king, and as you can see, there's a devastating attack. I should also mention that if black, instead of going to g8 in this position, goes to e7, knight d5 is simply checkmate. If the queen takes her offered rook, knight to d7 check, forks the king and queen, and no matter how you capture either the bishop on h5 or the knight on f6 first, black is still left with 2 rooks versus a rook and 3 minor pieces. So black opted to go for g takes on f6, which is the last blunder in the game, leading to checkmate in 5. You can try and calculate this, as it's easier than the first stopping point in this video. So it is bishop h6 check first. The king, if the king goes to g8, it's just mate in one with bishop f7 checkmate. If the king goes to g7, e7, it is knight d5 check. The king walks closer to e6, bishop f7 check, forcing the king to take move e5, followed by the move c3. Black resigned in this position, but the following next move, and it doesn't matter what black plays. If black, for example, plays f4, then simply bishop f4 is checkmate. If the bishop drops back somewhere, it's still bishop f4 checkmate. That's the whole idea, as the c pawn takes away the d4 square for the king to run away to. And that was the Viennese waltz. Now we need to do the second game, which is known as Zukertort's Immortal. Zukertort was 41 years of age when he played this game, and his opponent, Joseph Henry Blackburn, was 42 years old. Joseph Henry Blackburn, known as the Black Death, was one of Britain's greatest chess masters. Famous for his blindfold and simultaneous exhibitions, he had major tournament victories at Vienna 1873, London 1876, and Berlin 1881. Though he never became world champion, he competed against legends like Steinitz and Lasker and remained active into his 70s. Revered in his later years, he was supported by the British chess community until his death. So, this game was played in 1883, just to make sure of that, because I unfortunately did not note down the time the games was played. The first game, by the way, was played in 1877. So Zukertort played with the white pieces against Blackburn with the black pieces, and the first move was c4. Known as the English opening, deriving its name from the English master Howard Staunton, who played it during his match in 1843 with St. Amand, and the London 1851 tournament, which was the first international chess tournament. It's a hypermodern approach at controlling the center from the flank, but also often used as a transpositional device similar to 1 knight f3 to avoid certain responses that black can play against d4, like the Nimzo-Indian defense and the Grunfeld defense. e6 was played, not giving much away, aiming to play either the Queen's Gambit declined or Dutch defense against d4. So if white plays d4, it's d5. If d4, it could also be f5. But usually white plays knight f3 in this position, which can lead to a variety of openings. Instead, we see e3, knight f6, knight f3, and b6. As can be seen, neither player is laying claim to the center, and are rather aiming to control it from the distance with pieces. Aaron Nimzowitsch would champion this approach, known as hypermodernism, 40 years later. Bishop e2 preparing to castle kingside, but more common are b3 and d4, leading to possessions resembling the Nimzo-Larsen attack of b3, and actually leading to the Queen's Indian defense Spassky system exactly if playing d4. To just quickly say what I'm talking about, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, which is the Nimzo-Indian defense, knight f3, b6, e3 is known as the Spassky system. There's a few differences in this move order, bishop e7 and bishop e2, and we've basically got the exact position from the game. The Nimzo-Larsen attack is b3, this is the symmetrical variation, b2, bishop b7, e3, knight f6, and we've got c4, a position that looks very similar to the position we have in the game. Black plays d5 after castles by white, and black strikes first in the center, attempting to claim it as his own. d4, and white stakes his own claim to the center as well, and doesn't release the tension in the center. The position seems very similar to the Tartakow defense from the Queen's Gambit Declined. You can go look that up yourself. Bishop d6 is a developing move, preparing to castle next move. Knight c3, castles, and b3, supporting the c4 pawn and preparing to fiancette the dark square bishop to the very dangerous long diagonal a1 to h8, aiming at the king's side. Knight b to d7, and black is finished with his development. Bishop b2, and white is also done with development. Queen a7 is an accuracy allowing white to improve their c3 knight and let it trade for the bishop on d6, which will be a superior piece if the position opens up. Best would have been a6, completely stopping this idea. Knight b5, knight e4, jumping the knight forwards and centralizing it on e4. Possible plans involve f5 and knight f6, firmly reinforcing the knight in the center. Knight takes d6, trading off the knight for the bishop. C takes d6, taking with the pawn and not the queen. Why double the pawns, you may ask? Because c takes d6 supports the e5 pawn push and takes away the c5 and e5 squares for the knight on f3. Knight d2, attempting to trade off the powerful knight on e4. Slightly better would have been c takes d5 first, opening up the position for the bishops. Likewise, knight d to f6 reinforces the knight on e4, but slightly better would have been d takes on c4, trying to keep the position closed. f3 was played, forcing the knight to either retreat or trade off for the knight on d2, and it also prepares to strike in the center with e4. Slightly better would have been the idea of rerouting the knight to b1 and then playing e3 followed by knight to c3. And that would have also supported the e4 push even more. But alas, the knights are traded, and d takes on c4, bishop takes c4, d5, attempting to close this position a bit more again, and staking claim to the center, and bishop d3, pointing both of white's bishops to the king's side, and it could be quite important in a potential future attack. Also notice how the position is starting to open up. Rook f to c8, rook a to e1, preparing the e4 push, and rook c7, preparing to double rooks on the c file. However, notice that there is no infiltration square for the rooks because the bishops cover the squares that are possible in the infiltration squares. e4 played, taking with the pawn will open up the position even more and will give white the full center. If not taken, white will instead advance his pawn, keeping the f6 knight, taking space in the center, and locking it at the same time. Rook a to c8, completing his idea of doubling the rooks. e5, just to showcase what I meant with d takes e4, f takes e4, we've got a full center, and the position is basically all opened up. e5 was played after rook a to c8, the knight drops back to e8 and f4. White starts the same side pawn storm now that the center is locked. we can see that the pawns in the center also indicate the flank white should play on, namely the king side, while black's pawns in turn show that black should play on the queen side. G6 attempts to stop the f5 pawn advance, rook e3 and f5, an attempt to stop further kingside expansion by white and taking space at the same time. Unfortunately, this only helps white to open up the position even more and rip open the king side even more. It should be noted that the position is not easy to play. White has a clear plan of attacking on the king side, while black doesn't have one. His rooks can't infiltrate on the c file into white's territory, and black's bishop is staying into its own pawn. The knight is also out of play on e8. After e takes on f6 and passant, the king side is opening up. Knight f6 is a mistake. It's a logical mistake, bringing the knight back into the game, but queen takes f6 would have been best. Knight f6 allows for f5, making use of the fact that the e pawn is pinned to the queen via the rook. C takes f5 is a possibility. The only issue is that the pin is still in place and bishop takes on f5 is the move. So the knight jumps forwards to e4, hitting white's queen in return. White now trades off his bishop with bishop takes e4, but it gets rid of the very dangerous knight on e4. That's very good. And the dark light square bishop for black is still looking into a pawn, and the black square bishop is very possibly gonna open up. F takes on g6 and rook c2, another mistake. It makes sense as it's forking the rook, the queen and bishop, but bishop d5 would have been best as it stops the dark square bishop of white opening up. And we'll see that in a few moves why that is important. So rook c2, g takes on h7 check, and the king doesn't take, because if the king were to take, it's forced mate in 8. We have rook h3 check, king g8, and queen h6. The only reason it's mate in 6 from this position is black will be giving up a lot of pieces to delay the mate. Otherwise, the king has no legal move, and any check in this position is checkmate. By the queen, that is. So, king to g8 is the best move, using the pawn as a shield, and this is commonly called an umbrella pawn. d5, discovered check. We see the bishop coming to life. e5, blocking the check, and queen b4, offering a trade of queens, and also a textbook example of removing the defender motif in action. Trading queens leads to an unstoppable mate in 7, because after queen trade, bishop takes on e5, the king is forced to take on e7, followed by rook h3 check, and this leads to checkmate. For example, king g8 is just rook h8 checkmate, and g6 is various rook moves that leads to checkmate. So rook f6, king g7, rook g3 check. If the king goes to h8, it's just rook h6 check. If h6, it's f7 check. f6, h6, bishop check, and then rook h7 checkmate, and so forth. I'm not going to go too much into it. Just know that all roads leads to checkmate. So after queen b4, rook 8 to c5 was played. The better move would have been rook 2 to c5, and the reason being the rook stays guarding the back rank. White is still winning in this position, is still having the game is still won by white, essentially, if you look at what the computer thinks. But more clearly on understanding why rook 8 to c5 is a blunder, is to see an action how important it was to have a back rank defended. So rook f8 check is very important. If the queen takes on f8, it's simply bishop to takes on e5 check, king takes h7, and queen takes on e4, and you can see yet again the pieces are pouring into the position, and this is in fact mate in 4. So the king can go to g7, but the pawn promoting is a no-go as well, so the black king has to take. Queen takes e4 check, the king goes back to g7, and bishop takes e5. But if the queen takes, it's just queen takes back, and this is just simply mate in 3 after king takes f8, queen e7, and we have checkmate. So the king takes on f8, and bishop g7 check. The king opts to go to g8, where it still is leading to checkmate after queen takes e7, and alternatively as well, the white has a queen for a rook. Black resigned in this position, and just to be clear, this also doesn't work because of queen takes e7, and queen taking also doesn't work because this is simply mate in 1. And so with that, this video, I believe, has showcased 2 wonderful and beautiful games by Johannes Zukertort, and I sincerely hope you learn from these games and see why Johannes Zukertort is an uncrowned legend. If you are in South Africa, in the Pretoria, in the Gauteng province, near the Pretoria city, please do check out the Pretoria Chess Club, and just know that we also have a Facebook page where you can check us out as well. With that, adios, everybody and everyone.